Chapter 301, Crossing into the DC Universe. Leon was unusually cautious this time. He was about to step into the DC Universe, a place where Superman's weakness, Kryptonite, existed. Although the core consciousness of the starry sky world had transformed him into a special life form, and in theory all the weaknesses of a Kryptonian should have been erased, Leon had never actually encountered Kryptonite before. A substance that could strip a Kryptonian like Superman of all his powers deserved every precaution. Besides, unless a being's genes were perfect, flaws always remained: poor adaptability, uneven development of abilities. So Leon wrapped every inch of his skin in the Dormammu armor. Stark Mansion on the west coast of Los Angeles. After half a year, Leon returned. The mansion had been empty for months since Tony and Pepper moved to New York. Usually only Jarvis ran the place, keeping the systems clean and maintained. The two brothers were in the garage on the ground floor, sunlight slanting through the windows. "Is this suit reliable? You really don't need the armor I built? I'll coat you with the best insulation layer," Tony said, inspecting the Dormammu suit Leon wore. He was still in his red and gold armor and was worryingly enthusiastic. Comics make it clear: the radiation from Kryptonite reacts with Kryptonian cells and causes pain, weakness, even death. You need to be well insulated. Leon nodded. "I know the details. I'm completely insulated from head to toe." "And we can't know the environment on the other side," Tony added. "Can your armor operate in space?" At that, Tony's grin widened. Come and see my Mark 16, built overnight." He spread his arms theatrically to show off the armor he wore. "This baby can handle any extreme environment. Even in space, it can supply oxygen and heat. By ionizing the liquids carried inside, it can give me enough oxygen for 24 hours. Lava, deep ocean, it's got functions for every disaster." Leon raised an eyebrow. "So you're ready? Not bringing any gold this time?" The first time Leon had crossed, Tony had even prepared gold, just in case. "I put a lot in the world ring," Tony said. He'd been prepared again. "But I don't think I'll need it, because I've made other preparations. Look." Tony tapped his chest, and the red and gold armor rippled and reconfigured into a pitch-black suit. A bat symbol appeared on the chest, and the helmet slid into a cowl that left his chin exposed. Tony dropped his voice. "I am Batman," then burst out laughing. "What do you think Batman would pay if I sold him this armor?" Before Leon could answer, Tony continued, "Enough to buy a whole lot of Kryptonite, I bet." He flicked a few batarangs from the armor's forearm. They whistled and embedded in the wall. Tony's face lit up. "If you're staying in DC for a while, we could even open another Stark company. Half a year in, we'd be richer than Wayne Enterprises." Leon chuckled. "You haven't even left, and you're already comparing yourself with Bruce Wayne. Do I even need to compare? I'm definitely richer than him." "Are you sure? In some comics, Batman says his wealth could buy half the world." "Hey, maybe in some parallel world I could buy the whole thing." Watching Tony, flushed with excitement, Leon knew his brother was ready and impatient. "So you're sure?" he asked. "Of course. Jarvis's subunits are ready. Want to procrastinate? Then let's go. I'll tell Pepper when we get back." Tony's face stiffened for a second. He blinked and tried to act casual, scanning the garage. "This place is nostalgic. I haven't been back in months. I remember when we built armor here." He changed the subject. "All right, Leon. Aren't we supposed to cross? Why haven't you started? Are you sure you're ready?" "Absolutely." Tony wasn't slowing down. "Start it. Pepper, you'll tell her later?" "Yeah, I'll tell her later." Leon narrowed his eyes at the vague answer, then activated the crossing. Searching. Keywords: DC TV series, Kryptonite, Superman, Clark Kent. Retrieving. Several bubbles appeared before Leon's eyes. Target worlds that matched the criteria. He selected one. World anchoring. Energy required for crossing. Confirmed. The energy inside Leon now felt as vast as a star. Taking Tony with him into a universe as large as DC wouldn't be a huge drain. They passed through a thin film, and then a solid surface met his feet. It seemed they hadn't crossed into open space this time. Leon opened his eyes. Tony, armor and all, lay slumped at his feet. Those who weren't strong enough often lost consciousness during a crossing. Even Leon, who during his first crossing could lift tens of thousands of tons with one arm, had felt brief discomfort. Tony, whose suit provided only around 100 tons of strength, would definitely need to sleep it off. Leon still ordered, Jarvis, check Tony's condition. Jarvis's voice came from the armor. Yes, young Master Leon. Life detection functions activated. Have we arrived in the DC universe, young Master Leon? Jarvis asked as it ran diagnostics and the suit's systems explored the surroundings. Yes. Leon looked around. Uneven rock walls enclosed them. They were in a cave. Narrow passages disappeared into darkness ahead and behind. Mr. Stark's vital signs are normal, Jarvis reported. His brain neural activity is weak. He has fallen into a deep sleep. Expect him to wake in approximately 7 minutes. Curious about the new world, Jarvis activated more sensors and guided the armor's systems to probe the area. This is a man-made cave, young master. Chapter 302. As soon as Zhang opened his eyes, he was Kryptonite, Jarvis reported. Analysis complete. This planet supports life. Atmospheric composition matches Earth. Probability of being on Earth, 98.7%. Leon nodded. He didn't immediately switch on his super hearing to eavesdrop. Instead, he asked Jarvis to wait until Tony woke, closed his eyes, and reached out with his transcendent ability to contact the world consciousness of the DC universe. DC didn't have an eternity analog like Marvel. Its cosmology was woven with Christian elements. In that structure, the closest thing to an ultimate consciousness was God, the creator of the DC cosmos. Below that were beings some fans likened to a trinity: God, the Monitor, and the Source. Beneath them were figures like Lucifer and Michael, beings who had once shaped multiverses. To those titans, Leon's powers were no more significant than an ant. But he had been given a chance, Legie Duo's generous gift, and wanted to try. He waited, sending his thoughts out and holding them there. After several minutes with no answer, he reopened his eyes. God, apparently, didn't want to be bothered. Leon felt a little disappointed, but not crushed. The fact that he was in DC at all was reward enough. He activated supervision and X-ray vision and scanned the cave they'd just crawled into. At once he raised an eyebrow. Crystals were embedded all along the walls, glittering and pulsing with a strange radiation. Kryptonite, he murmured. What a coincidence. The crystals cast a soft, golden sheen. Jarvis cataloged the signal immediately. These are emitting substantial radiation, Master Leon. If this is DC, Kryptonite, Leon finished, looking them over. Gold kryptonite. Gold shone from every crystal in the grotto. Jarvis cross-referenced his databases. In some sources, gold kryptonite permanently strips Kryptonians of their powers. We should withdraw immediately. Leon hesitated. In comics, gold kryptonite was usually depicted as a power stripper, but in live-action adaptations, things shifted. In Smallville and in the TV series Superman and Lois, a golden variant, sometimes called X-kryptonite, acted differently. In some stories, it amplified powers or even bestowed abilities on ordinary people. Hold on, Leon said. Jarvis, don't destroy anything yet. Jarvis's palm repulsor lit, ready to demolish the cave to prevent contamination, but Leon stopped him. He switched to super hearing and filtered out all ambient noise. Voices drifted just outside the cave. Jordan, Jonathan, you did well. Really, it was all Lana's doing. There it is. Names. Jordan, Jonathan, Lana. The clues snapped into place. He smiled. This wasn't just Smallville. It was the world of Superman and Lois. In this continuity, Clark and Lois had two sons, Jordan and Jonathan. Clark had struggled to balance saving the world with being a father, so he and Lois retreated to Smallville to raise their boys. The town's myths, childhood bullies, Lana Lang, and the crystalline kryptonite that came to Earth with Clark were all here. But unlike many versions, the kryptonite in this world glowed golden and enhanced power. That made it the perfect test subject. If the gold here boosted abilities, Leon could learn how kryptonite affected him. He peeled a sliver from the wall and let Jarvis retract the Mark armor's outer plating so his hand could touch it directly. The golden crystal met his palm. Radiation slid through him like a current. Cells and genes somewhere inside him stirred and muttered as if waking to a command. He concentrated on the sensation and watched for any change. Half a minute passed with nothing outwardly different. The internal stirring remained, an impression more than an effect, as if the kryptonite had laid out a blueprint and left it to his body to follow. This is odd, Leon said. In the TV show, it didn't do this. Master Leon, Jarvis advised, we should collect samples and analyze them in the inner world. Leon placed the fragment into his inner world for safe containment, then drifted back to the rock face to take more. His hand reached out, and in an instant the whole scene shattered like a flipped slide reel. The golden hue in front of him blinked, then shifted, green. Radiation slammed through the cave. The color change was a bad sign. "Jarvis!" Leon yelped and instinctively flew backwards. The Mark armor and its occupant were gone. He vaulted up through rock and dirt, bursting out of the cave mouth into the open air, and the sky was wrong. A blood-red sun smoked over the world, casting everything in harsh crimson light. Heat rolled off the ground. The atmosphere itself felt altered. The sight hit him like a physical blow. He realized in a heartbeat what had happened. He'd been ripped to a different moment in this world's timeline, one of catastrophe. The transcendent ability had dropped him into a time node where the world was ending. "So it took me to the ending of Superman and Lois Season 2, Leon muttered, half to himself, half in frustration. His transcendent ability never sent him to ordinary moments. It always picked out the turning points, the nodes where a world was breaking. Chapter 303, Direction of Genetic Transition. The world was on a doomsday countdown. Leon's supervision and superhearing cataloged death and disaster in real time. Jet airliners vanished from the cloud sea, and their passengers plummeted from 1,000 meters. Drivers blinked out of existence, and their cars, still at speed, crashed into service stations and ignited them. Everything in this place was the opposite of the Earth. Leon had left seconds before. Here the sun was red, the planet was square, and people reversed their word order when they spoke. If someone on his Earth said, "fuck you," people here would say, "you fuck." The word aminos had become a true curse. Even Superman was inverted. In this world, the Superman analog was Bizarro. He had ice breath and heat vision. A green sun and green kryptonite would strengthen him, while X-kryptonite and a yellow sun would weaken him. But at this moment, Bizarro was already dead. Both worlds were sliding toward doomsday, and Leon felt it keenly. Under the red sun, he didn't weaken. In fact, he kept growing stronger, though far more slowly than under a yellow sun. The source will of the starry universe had altered him. The Kryptonian trait of strengthening under yellow sun radiation had become something broader, sun-bathing evolution. He realized now that it applied to any natural sunlight, not just a yellow sun. He tested his new understanding instinctively. What about kryptonite? He thought of the green kryptonite back in the cave. In a blink, he was inside the hollow, his battlesuit on his arm flowing back like water. He picked up a shard of green rock with his bare hand. Green kryptonite was Superman's classic bane. It could sap his power, bring him agonizing pain, or kill him outright. But Leon felt nothing. More precisely, holding the green shard stirred the same impulse he'd felt when he'd touched the gold piece before. A biological tug, a restless whisper in his genes urging transformation. He hesitated, then decided to follow it. He could afford to experiment. His inner world still existed, his two clones were intact, and the Blood Sea clone could provide the energy to resurrect him if the main body collapsed. If his genes shattered, he could rebuild. He let the transformation begin. The change destroyed him. Flesh liquefied, bones dislocated, blood sprayed. Pain tore through him until his body became a foul pool. By the time he understood it had gone wrong, it was too late. He simply had to endure the end. The agony of physical destruction was indescribable, but his face hardly moved. His will was iron. He was a different man from the one who had staggered back onto Earth after half a year of sunbathing in the universe. In this DC reality, he could have driven a Green Lantern ring with his will, planet-splitting in potential. When the main body died, his perspective shifted from 3 to 2. He watched the failure dispassionately. Using his world power, he wiped the corroded blood from the cave floor, then poured energy into a new body. Seconds later, he reconstituted himself, sliding back into his Dormammu suit and reappearing where he had been. He stared at the green kryptonite embedded in the wall. "The genes wanted to change," he muttered. "So the direction is right. But to find the right genetic configuration, I'll need to survive repeated collapses, unless I can get a better guide." He thought of the Life Codex, the Kryptonian gene vault. In the canonical film, Superman's father had injected the codex into him. The trillions of gene variants recorded there would reveal a path for genetic leaps. The source will had removed all his fatal flaws, but hadn't given him the full roadmap. It hadn't made him immune to kryptonite. It had redirected his evolution so kryptonite could become a catalyst. The golden X-kryptonite and the green shard had both been prods in the same direction. His genes wanted to grow stronger by using kryptonite, like a hybrid of Bizarro and Superman without their weaknesses. That, he believed, could be the next tier of his genetic ascent. He couldn't say how long it would take, so his first priority was obvious: find the life codex. For now, though, there were victims he could help. He gathered the green kryptonite from the cave and stepped out. Though his movements were instantaneous, the world's disasters were still unfolding. Airplane passengers were still screaming as they fell. He widened his focus. World power, a fusion of telekinesis and gene primal energy, radiated outward and gripped the planet. Time felt paused. Falling people were eased gently to the ground. Gas station infernos went out as if a breeze snuffed them. Crumbling buildings settled without lethal collapse. Ships and cars that had been hurtling into catastrophe were repositioned. Leon felt like a high-dimensional deity rearranging fate, nudging each strand of disaster into non-lethal outcomes. He'd told Tony he wouldn't play the perpetual superhero, but that if a disaster were within reach, he would act. He had saved strangers on a subway in his previous life. He didn't need a cape to do what was right. When he finally released his world power, every person who had been in danger was alive and unharmed. He had one more task: find Tony. Then, in the deepest recesses of the cave, there was a spatial gate, an aperture opened by a great villain of this world that led to the positive world. Leon stepped through. Beyond the gate was the void outside the universes. Directly opposite him floated the black bubble of the positive world's universe, and in its side a second spatial gate returned to that Earth. He paused. Between the anti-world's bubble and the positive world's bubble, someone surged with powerful energy. Ellie Alston stood between the two universes, radiating power. Chapter 304, Clark and Tony Ally. She was a fanatic, a middle-aged woman obsessed with a godly dream. She was also the architect of the apocalypse Leon had just witnessed, not just of one world, but of two. Ally's ancestors had left behind a rhomboid pendant, one in the main world, one in the anti-world. The pendants contained astonishing power and allowed communication between worlds. If one person possessed both at once, they could link the main world and the anti-world, letting people from one world merge with their doppelgangers from the other. A doppelganger, naturally, was just another version of oneself from a parallel world. But because the anti-world was opposite in almost everything, life experience, values, and personalities could be drastically different. Ally came to believe that once people merged with their counterparts, they could be transformed into gods. To make everyone a god and build a kingdom of gods, her main body and antibody formed a church and began recruiting followers, taking control of whole societies. In the anti-world, she'd become a true dictator. She had brainwashed entire populations. Even Bizarro Superman's son fell under her sway. Even when Bizarro Superman and the main world Superman joined forces to resist, they couldn't stop her. Not long before Leon arrived in that moment, Bizarro Superman had died in the struggle. Ally had obtained both pendants and merged with her own counterpart. She became a demigod. The main world Superman still tried every trick he could, even teaming up with his half-brother. Together, they destroyed the rhomboid pendant. That should have been the end. But as a demigod, Ally could forcibly absorb outside energy and use it herself. In a single encounter, she drained decades of power Superman had stored. He was reduced to a powerless husk, as helpless as when he'd first arrived on Earth. With his energy gone, no one could stop Ally. Her true plan began. She would fuse the main world and the anti-world, forcing everyone's main body and antibody to merge into a single being. When the worlds were completely fused, she would become a true god. Leon watched her in the void between two universes, standing alone with her arms outstretched like a crucified figure. Energy, Superman's energy, surged through her, pulling the two worlds together. He thought of how this was supposed to go. The powerless Superman would enter the sun, regain his strength, and put an end to Ally's delusion. But Ally's presence here made that passive hope intolerable. If he waited for Superman to resolve everything, he'd feel useless. Leon sealed himself inside the Dormammu suit to shield against the chaos and hurtled toward Ally. Divider, Are you Batman? Are you Superman? Smallville, the Kent farm. Tony, his suit altered to look like Batman, pulled up his faceplate and revealed a chin that was, mercifully, not a butt chin. 15 minutes earlier, he'd woken in a cave. Before he could even complain about being knocked out after another city-hopping transmigration, Jarvis fed him worse news. Leon had vanished. Not a mysterious theatrical disappearance, nor a voluntary wandering off. Leon had simply disappeared in front of the suit's cameras and sensors. Tony kept his face calm, but he was rattled. He asked Jarvis to try to contact Leon. Jarvis reported that young Master Leon was out of signal, and from the way he'd vanished, from his expression and behavior, it wasn't voluntary. Tony's expression sharpened. He flipped up the faceplate, wiped his face, and told Jarvis not to rush him, then listened as Jarvis summarized the situation in this strange DC world. Jarvis hooked into the global network and all available satellites, searching for Leon. Tony controlled the suit and flew out of the cave. As he came out, Jarvis gave another unsettling update. "Sir, I have bad news. We seem to be in a world that is about to end." Tony pointed blankly at the sky. "I see that too. In what normal Earth sky is the sun square with a sphere around it?" Both of them went a little numb. He'd just arrived in DC, his teammate had vanished, and the world looked like it was on the verge of annihilation. What now? Did Iron Man have to save this planet too? Is there a gauntlet waiting for him to snap his fingers with? Tony had Jarvis search for other heroes. Most of the superheroes in this continuity seemed present in this world, but only one was actively showing up: Superman. Tony guessed this was a Superman-dominant universe, like a single-issue comic world or a self-contained filmverse, and had Jarvis zero in on his location. Jarvis, who knew Superman's true identity, locked onto a farm not far from the cave. Tony altered the armor to look like Batman and headed for the Kent place. When he arrived, Jarvis scanned the man in front of him and flagged a more disturbing detail. The physical condition of this Superman was worse than that of an ordinary person. Tony couldn't hide his disbelief. "Are you really Superman? Why do you look so frail?" Clark Kent looked him over with equal suspicion. "Are you really Batman?" They both stared. Tony's Batman had a strangely shaped beard and a chin that didn't match the usual comics. He was smiling in a way the Dark Knight never did. Clark, looking older than textbook Superman, rubbed a hand over his face. He'd seen his share of alternate Batmen, but never one with a beard like that. And never one so cheerful. Clark sighed and answered first. "Long story. You must be a Batman from another world. I'm afraid you've been caught up in Allies' work." Tony's face turned serious. This sounded like one of those DC plotlines he hadn't expected. Finding Leon would be harder now. "I came with our world's Superman, but he disappeared. Do you have any idea where he might have gone?" Tony asked bluntly. "Disappeared?" Clark frowned, then slumped his palm on the fence post. "He probably went into the anti-world." "The anti-world?" "Because of Ally, our world has started to merge with an opposite world," Clark said, his voice steady despite the worry. "At first, objects began fusing between worlds. Then living things started changing. People were merging with their counterparts. During that process, people and things from the two worlds began randomly changing which world they belonged to." He looked seriously at Tony. "The planet is already suffering for it. We have to stop Ally." Tony tilted his head. "Why haven't you gone to stop her?" he asked. Clark's expression went heavy. "All my power has been absorbed by Ally. Right now I'm weaker than an ordinary human. At the moment, all I can do is be with my family." There was a quiet dignity to him that made Tony reassess the picture of sacrifice he'd always seen. Then Clark's gaze drifted to the sky. The square red sun of the anti-world was already beginning to merge with Earth's round yellow sun. "There may be one way," he said slowly. "If I enter the sun, I can regain my power. But—" He didn't finish the sentence. Tony understood. Entering the sun might restore him, but it also carried the risk of never coming back. "Maybe we should first find Leon, my Superman," Tony said. "He might have a way." Tony's mind was also working through options for this world's crisis. The Avengers had never had to deal with whole-world fusion. Whatever technology or magic solved this would have to be something both of his science and Clark's experience could reach toward together. Chapter 305, Searching for Superman. Leon Clark didn't argue with Tony's suggestion. He considered it for a moment and then nodded. You make a lot of sense. At a time like this, we can only rely on another Superman. The middle-aged man with stubble and tired eyes returned the nod. His face had been lined with worry since they met, but after hearing Tony's idea, it lightened a bit. Tony grinned. You're serious? You actually seem more optimistic than I expected. Clark smiled back. Because your companion is a Superman. Every Superman I've ever met has been a miracle. Including you? Tony asked. Clark hadn't expected that. He hesitated for a few seconds, then shook his head. No. Well, not exactly. You can make miracles too, a firm female voice cut in. Louise and Clark's two children stood in the doorway, watching the two men from the house steps. Clark, even with the apocalypse outside, we can be calm because everyone knows you're here. You're hope. Go do what a Superman should do. Louise sounded steady. She and Clark had shared decades. She'd survived too many crises to panic now. Her faith in him was unshakable. Clark looked at his wife and children, then slowly nodded. When he met Tony's gaze again, his expression had a new resolve. Let's go. We'll go into the anti-world to find your Superman. The passage is in the cave. I'll lead the way. Tony tilted his head and took a long look at Clark. Middle-aged, settled into a family life, this was a Superman who, for his family, could go to extremes to save the world. He'd also seen reports Jarvis had pulled from the network. Despite the destruction, the unrest on Earth was far less than an apocalypse should produce. People still believed in Superman, and that belief kept them from falling apart. It was because this Clark had been a steady guardian for decades. No problem. I'll follow you. Tony felt it necessary to bring this Superman along. He'd seen too many comic book moments where a super went berserk only to be suddenly vulnerable. Better to have backup. His suit thrusters flared and he rose into the air, ready for the cave. Then he saw Clark walking toward the pickup truck parked by the barn. Wait, Superman, are you planning to drive a pickup to the cave? Tony called down. I've lost my powers, Clark replied. So right now a truck is all I've got. And you, Batman, you're flying? Tony hovered in his suit, looking absurd from Clark's perspective. Cough. I'm the Batman of our world, and I've got the sort of money superpower. But out where I come from, people actually call me Iron Man. He coughed again. Iron Man? Clark blinked. That was a Marvel hero. Was this world's Bruce Wayne a comics fan? That's a fine name, Clark said. So you're going to fly me in a Batwing? Tony didn't have a Batwing. He'd only adapted his armor to look like Batman so he could sell it to Bruce Wayne after he arrived in this universe. No Batwing, but I can lend you armor. He landed, pulled an arc reactor out, and under Clark's curious stare, pressed it to the center of the man's chest. Nanoalloy fanned out and wrapped Clark, covering his powerless body in a golden-red suit. The transformation was quick and smooth. Clark stood there suddenly armored like Iron Man. Perfect, Tony said, pleased. The Batman guise of his own suit slid away and the familiar sleek gold and red returned. Tony thought it looked far superior to the brooding Batman aesthetic. Clark, though, gave him an odd look. Batman, no, Iron Man. You wouldn't happen to be Tony Stark, would you? How do you know my name? Tony asked, alarmed. Had his reputation as Iron Man reached this universe already? You're not Bruce? Clark's gaze sharpened. Your Superman companion. He wouldn't be Hyperion or Sentinel, would he? Clark had noticed that some heroes in other universes resembled Kryptonians. Tony looked confused. Hyperion? Sentinel? My companion is Leon. He's a Superman, like you. He gets stronger in the sun. Clark blinked. So you're a fan of Marvel? What's Marvel? Hold on. First get me to Leon. We can talk on the way. Tony had Jarvis lock flight controls to Clark's armor, and they headed for the cave. Flying wasn't new to Clark. He adapted quickly to the suit. Your armor's similar to John's, Clark observed. A bit slower, but very strong. John? Tony asked. Who's that? John's a friend from another universe, Clark explained. His armor runs on Kryptonite. His speed and strength are close to mine. People call him Steel. Steel? John Henry Irons. Tony's eyebrows rose. He knew the name, an armored man who could stand toe-to-toe with the impossible. If John's armor could rival Superman, then maybe Clark's descriptions were an exaggeration after all. Tony glanced at Clark, wondering how powerful this particular Superman still was without his powers. The entrance is up ahead. Slow down, Clark said as they approached the cave mouth. As they flew into the dark, Clark filled Tony in. Time flows slower in the anti-world. I went there over a month ago. I stayed a day and a month past here. The two worlds are merging and synchronizing time now, but the anti-world still lags. Your Superman disappeared less than 20 minutes ago here. Only a few minutes may have passed there. He should still be near the cave, inside the anti-world's gate. We just need to get to the gate deep in the cave, and we can reach Leon. So we go through the space gate to find Leon, Tony said, more to himself than to Clark. Chapter 306, Go Stop Your Superman. That's right. They moved through the cramped cave. Clark's voice turned serious. After the space gate, there's a stretch of void. Ally is in that void. So we have to cross it as fast as possible and get into the anti-world space gate without drawing her attention, Tony said. Clark warned, Ally can absorb other people's energy. We need to avoid fighting her if we can. It's Ally again. You never properly introduced this big villain. How did she bring about the end of the world? Tony asked. Clark pursed his lips and then explained everything. When they finished, they stood before the massive portal carved deep into the rock. Sunlight didn't reach this part of the cave. The only illumination came from the ghostly blue glow spilling from the gateway. Tony and Clark paused and looked up at the space portal that seemed to stretch to the end of the universe. Ally used the pendant to become a god, Clark said. Then she started trying to merge people with their doppelgangers so they'd become gods too. Tony was stunned. That's bold, Thanos-level ambition, but forcing two opposite souls to merge will probably break them, won't it? Clark hadn't thought that far through. All he knew was that Ally's actions were destroying the world and had to be stopped. After a moment's reflection, he nodded. It seems likely. Since she merged with her other self, she's grown even more extreme. Tony flipped his faceplate up and rubbed his chin. Then we have to stop her. I've got an idea. What idea? Clark pressed. The man in armor looked exactly like the comic book Tony Stark. Clark felt the same surreal recognition he'd had before when learning that Batman was Bruce Wayne. This was a superbrain, someone who could outthink most threats. Suddenly, Clark felt a confidence he hadn't felt even with his powers, a comfort from finding a brilliant external mind. Since that pendant connected worlds, maybe I can build a device to reverse the pendant's energy, Tony said. If the merging process went one way, we can reverse it the same way. Seeing Clark's worried expression, Tony smiled. Worried about energy? Don't be. Leon carries more than enough. We just need to find him, and we can start the reverse process. Clark's face went sheepish. It's not that. I should have said earlier, the diamond pendant was destroyed. Morgan and I used heat vision on it. Tony's plan faltered. Destroyed? He gaped. Then how is Ally merging the worlds? She became a demigod and absorbed my power, so she can still pull the worlds together, Clark explained. Tony had no answer. Half of the villain's ability, it seemed, had come from Superman himself. What do we do now? Clark asked, treating Tony like the strategist he was. Tony frowned. I haven't dealt with world merging before either. If I could gather enough parameters, I might be able to engineer a global reverse. But there isn't time. How little time? Clark demanded. Less than 12 hours until the worlds completely merge, Tony said. Then let's go find Leon. Tony closed his faceplate and prepared to fly into the space gate. Clark followed. Just before they entered, Clark slapped his head. Oh, one more thing. He grabbed Tony. The passage inside the space gate creates heavy spatial compression. You need extreme speed to get through. Even I felt uncomfortable last time. Iron Man, is your armor's defense strong enough? Clark asked. Tony looked annoyed. Can you wait to tell me everything at once next time? Jarvis, activate a vibranium outer layer. Yes, sir. Nanomaterials on Tony's suit shifted, the outer shell reconfiguring into vibranium within moments. Clark looked over Tony's armor with a hint of wonder and shook his head. There aren't any ultrasonic waves in that space gate, right? Vibranium can stand up to nuclear blasts, but ultrasonic resonance could dull it. No, Tony replied. Then let's go. They ignited their thrusters and shot into the space gate. The entrance lived up to Clark's warning, a violent, tearing pressure that played across their suits. Tony could hear the vibranium clanging like blades rubbing together. After a dizzying spin, they burst out into the void, their armors held. Tony smiled with pride at his intact Mark 16, full of functions, built to handle alien dangers. He was about to boast when Clark's voice crackled through his helmet radio. "That's John! Wait, someone's attacking Ally! Is that the Superman you mentioned? No, we have to stop him. She'll drain all his energy." Tony looked up. They were in the black expanse between worlds. Darkness was absolute except for the light radiating from Ally. Even from this distance, the woman's face was clear, wrinkled, aged, channeling enormous power to draw the two worlds together. In front of her, a flying armor had been flung aside. A single figure stood opposite her, Leon in the Dormammu suit. The throne armor was probably John, Steelman, who had clearly tried to intervene and failed. "Wait, Superman," Tony said, halting Clark. "That is the Superman from my world. He's my brother, Leon. Trust him. He can beat Ally." Clark's anxiety spiked. "You don't understand. Ally's energy absorption is terrifying. Morgan and I, and even Bizarro, couldn't resist her. Even if he's strong, she'll drain him. He'll end up like me," Clark warned. Tony's confidence wavered. The enemy sounded truly formidable. He watched the two figures confront each other, torn for a moment, when Leon suddenly blurred forward. His speed was so great, the suit's instruments showed what looked like two Leons at once. Tony couldn't see exactly what he did. All he saw was Ally blasted backward. Chapter 307, Accidentally Eliminating the Big Villain. Leon had meant to strike Ally directly, but before he could move, a missile beat him to it. In the black expanse, the flaming projectile was impossible to miss, like someone sounding a horn through a megaphone. Leon's supervision swept it and registered the payload, heavy concentrations of kryptonite and a mechanism that would bathe the blast in red sun radiation. In the world of Superman and Lois, that combination could only mean one person, John Henry Irons, the Steel Man. A gray armored suit flashed past. The pilot turned his head and looked straight at Leon, clearly surprised to see another hero diving into the void to defend the world. It really is John, Leon thought. In the comics, John is a Justice League member, but in the Superman and Lois series, his backstory is strange and tragic. He came from another universe where his name had been Lex Luthor, bald, bitter, driven by a consuming hatred of Superman. In that world, his wife was Lois Lane, and they had a daughter. It was a happy domestic life until Superman, taken over by his Kryptonian brother, destroyed human civilization. Lois died under Superman's heat vision. After the world fell, John swore vengeance and intended to die with or at Superman's side. At the moment of death, he was instead flung into the Earth of Superman and Lois, where his counterpart, also named John, had already died, but Lois still lived. He assumed the identity of his dead counterpart and set out to kill Superman. His suit, reinforced with Kryptonite, even gave him the upper hand in battles, but he ultimately failed. Over time, seeing Superman's true character and witnessing the family he had lost in his own universe, Lois and her child, the way they loved and saved each other, John let go of his hatred. He became an ally to this world's Superman. Even his daughter from the original universe crossed over and became like a sibling to Superman's children. Now John was protecting this Earth, and he'd charged at Ally to stop her. Leon watched John fly straight for Ally and felt a strange reverence, something like the feeling he had for the two Captain Americas and Carter back in his own world. Then, without changing flight path, John flew through Ally's redirected blast. Ally had absorbed the missile's kinetic and thermal energy and reflected it back at him. The suit took the hit, and John's intervention ended with him flying away, badly damaged but alive. Far off, he raised a thumb at Leon. Leon couldn't tell whether it meant John had no regrets or if he was cheering the man still standing. He shook his head, then focused on Ally. Ally was suffused with Superman energy, glowing so brightly she rivaled Captain Marvel. She fixed Leon with a hard, warning stare. Leon smiled almost kindly as he weighed his options. From what he'd just seen with John, Ally hadn't just gained power, she'd become an energy-absorbing beast, closer to an enhanced Sebastian Shaw. Heat vision and similar attacks would be meaningless. He could use enough energy to make her explode. The world ring with its 100,000 stars as backup made that technically possible. But he wanted a cleaner finish. He wrapped her in a biofield and moved. Leon's figure shattered the light barrier and reappeared in front of Ally like a ghost from the void. Her reflexes were faster now that she'd taken on Superman's energy, but not fast enough. Leon's fist connected with her face, and she was sent flying. His one-arm strength now exceeded the mass of the Earth. A strike delivered with that force, concentrated on such a small contact area, created instantaneous pressures capable of compressing ordinary matter to molecular or even neutron levels. Ally hadn't reacted in time to activate any absorption at the point of impact. Her head, her whole skull, became free-floating molecules in the void. For a moment, Leon felt genuine surprise. Because Ally had absorbed Superman's energy, he'd assumed would have Superman-like physical resilience. Instead, she broke apart like a fragile thing. Did the Superman energy she absorbed not strengthen her body? He wondered. Superman's energy could move worlds. If it were anchored to Superman himself, his body would withstand a punch like that. But Ally had the energy and not the physical substrate to take it. She was as fragile as a cookie. Leon couldn't help thinking he'd learned something about the Superman in Superman and Lois, why that Superman often gets a few hard hits when he first faces a new villain. Against ordinary humans, Superman can modulate the force of his blows from experience. Against an unfamiliar supervillain, a wrong estimate of the opponent's durability can be fatal. Maybe Superman takes a few hits to test his foe. An odd lesson, but one Leon couldn't immediately put to use. Leon, you actually killed her? Tony's voice came suddenly, clear in Leon's head. Two Mark 16 armors, battered and smoking, approached from the distance, carrying the damaged John between them. Leon's suit formed a comm loop inside his helmet. Sound doesn't travel in the void, so he could receive but not reply with ordinary voice. Tony, he murmured. In another suit, calm, firm, with a stubbled jaw, sat Clark. The actor playing this Superman had once played a werewolf in Teen Wolf. His presence had a gentle, sunlit clarity to it. Among the many versions of Superman on screen, this one was a striking, quietly powerful presence. Chapter 100,000 Stars Explode. His greatest moments had ranked him among the top live-action Supermen. But in daily life, he was just a good father who knew how to talk to children. Even in a fight, he would take the first blows before fighting back. Whether he faced ordinary criminals or Kryptonian Supermen, he always let himself be hit first. Still, Wolf Superman's strength was beyond doubt. Where other Supermen, like the one called Superman, could be crippled by a Kryptonite spray, Wolf Superman could fly with Kryptonite fragments embedded in him and still fire heat vision non-stop. Decades under the sun had made the middle-aged man gentler, but his power kept growing. As Leon sized him up, Tony didn't forget to introduce everyone. That's right, Superman brought me here from the void to find you. You know him, Clark Kent. And this is John. He's Clark's friend. They nodded, introductions done. There was no time to socialize. I was thinking, Tony said, after you knocked out Allie, you could have used her body as a transit point to reverse engineer a way to push the worlds apart. But she died. Tony sounded regretful. Leon shook his head. I thought the same. If I could control Allie, maybe I could end this. But she was too fragile. Hearing that, Wolf Superman and John looked puzzled. They had never even been able to approach Ally. How could she be described as fragile? Tony's mind immediately jumped to another plan. What about the Space Stone? Can you use the stone to separate the two worlds? Leon produced the original blue Space Stone from his inner world. Once it gleamed like treasure, now it looked dull and lifeless. The Space Stone only works in our universe, he said. It's useless here. They continued to discuss ways to save the worlds. Wolf Superman and John could only listen. But when Wolf Superman heard about the Space Stone, his eyes lit up. Finally confirmation that these two came from the Marvel Universe. Even though the worlds were ending, he couldn't help feeling excited. He and his sons loved Marvel stories. This felt like characters from fiction stepping into reality. He only wondered which character Leon was. He had an S on his chest. Was he not a Sentinel? Wolf Superman mulled it over, while Leon and Tony moved on to a new plan. All right, Leon said. I'll try to push the two worlds apart. He flew toward the center, between the two universe bubbles. He planned to attempt it with his immediacy clone. But once he felt the state of the two worlds, his chest tightened, as if a huge weight had dropped into him. Something was deeply wrong. Because of Ally's pull, the anti-worlds bubble and the positive worlds bubble had been moving toward one another. Originally, they would merge into one. Earth, at the center of the universes, had begun to show signs of overlap. Ally had been the fulcrum, her special power the hinge that made fusion possible. Now she was dead. Without that fulcrum, except for the Earth that had already started to overlap, the two universes no longer merged. They were still approaching each other, though. This was a collision about to happen. If it wasn't stopped soon, both universes could be destroyed within hours. Leon hovered where Ally had been and thought, "This is bad. I came to save the worlds, and instead I accelerated their destruction." Even if he hadn't gone after Ally, the Iron Man John of this world and Wolf Superman's brother Morgan would have tried to kill her. They might not have succeeded. Only Leon had defeated the final villain so easily. The realization deepened inside him. At that moment, the Blood Sea clone and the Blacklight virus clone were useless. A memory flashed. Wolf Superman saving the worlds. Leon spread his hands, one toward each universe bubble. Golden yellow energy began to rise from him. It surged, collected, and grew vast. In seconds, Leon was bathed in golden light like a suddenly erupting star. A torrent of power poured from his hands and struck the barriers of the two worlds. The flow seemed endless. This enormous output did not come from the Blood Sea clone. Leon drew directly on the energy of 100,000 stars from the world ring. He used his body as a conduit, letting that scorching power converge, flow, and pour out like 100 rivers into the sea. The stellar power, processed through his Kryptonian bloodline, became a golden stream of light. As the energy swelled, cracks appeared across Leon's skin. From those fissures, not blood but molten-like strands of golden light oozed. The three watching from a distance were stunned, the void filled with Leon's golden flow, the formless chaos beyond the universes turning into a kind of sanctuary of light. "It's slowing. The worlds are slowing. Ha ha!" Tony shouted. Jarvis detected it first. The two universe bubbles that had been racing together began to decelerate. Wolf Superman clenched his fists, wanting to cheer. Then the golden light went out as abruptly as a switch. The intense illumination winked off, leaving nothing but empty black. Leon, who had been suspended between the worlds, was gone. He'd been reduced to dust in the deluge of star energy. Tony's laughter died in his throat. He stared into the void. "Why did it stop? Leon, where's Leon?" A leaden weight settled in Tony's chest. His eyes widened as a terrible thought formed. Tender memories of Leon streamed through his mind, and he nearly went blank. Then, as if from nowhere, a newly grown Leon, nurtured by the Blood Sea clone, reappeared where the original had been standing. "Huh?" Tony stared, stunned. What had happened? The distant Leon looked around, shook his head in dissatisfaction, then suddenly snapped back to stand before them. "The two worlds aren't merging anymore, but they're still about to collide," Leon told them. "It's worse than I thought. I slowed the collision a little, but it's not enough." He remembered what had just occurred, the explosive state a Superman might enter after flying into a star's core and circling it. That detonation's strength depended on the Superman's will and the intensity of his ideals. Leon hadn't been idealistic enough. He'd essentially been an energy converter. The 100,000 stars, power magnified through him and slammed into the universe bubbles, but it only slowed their approach. If a truly idealistic Superman had done it, they might have been propelled into the fifth dimension. Tony's eyebrows shot up. "Are you going to do it again? Several times?" he asked, then added, "Did something go wrong with you just now?" What could be wrong? It was only a minor injury from an energy overload. Leon waved it off. He had died once, sure, but he'd come back. No big deal. Tony still looked shaken. "But I couldn't even see you just now." "I went to bask in the sun to heal," Leon said without much fuss. "I was too fast for you to catch." "Bask in the sun?" Clark blinked. "You can heal from sunlight? Are you really Kryptonian?" "To be precise, I'm an Earthling who accidentally gained a Kryptonian bloodline," Leon corrected. "So you're like Jordan." Clark grinned, pleased to have found a kindred spirit. Leon was left a little speechless at the comparison to Clark's son. "There are some differences," he muttered, then grew serious. "Kryptonian or not isn't the point, Clark. Your world's crisis isn't over." Leon pointed to the two slowly drifting universe bubbles. "I can help stop the collision of the universes. A few hundred more of those maneuvers, and the motion can be arrested. But there's a problem, Clark. The two Earths have already started merging. Even if I stop the universes from colliding further, your two Earths won't separate. He explained clearly. The Earths were halfway merged, and the process had frozen, neither progressing nor reversing. If that remained unchecked, today would still be the end of the world. Clark's face hardened. He'd hoped the man in front of him had solved everything. He'd even pictured spending the evening with Louise and their new friends. Now hope felt fragile. Is there any way to fix it? He asked. Leon shook his head. Not by me. The merging involves space-time mechanics. In my universe, I can distort space and slow time, but I can't do what would be needed here. The arrangement of time and space in your universe is different from mine. Hearing that, even Leon, who just pulled off a miracle, couldn't help made Clark's chest tighten. He drew in a quick breath. Tony, you're Iron Man. Can't you do something? Tony's mind raced, pulling on every scrap of knowledge. Given enough time, he might build a device to separate the two Earths. But there wasn't enough time. He fished for any off-the-wall idea that might help, but nothing obvious came. Still, Clark was gripping his arm, looking to him for a miracle. For years, Tony had read Superman comics with the fervor of a worshiper, even dreaming up fights between himself and Superman. Now the real thing stood in front of him, asking for the world. Let me think, Tony muttered, rubbing his chin through his faceplate. Time was the enemy. If only he could have one of those sudden flashes of insight, what Leon called a subjective burst. Subjective burst. Tony's eyes went wide. He turned to Clark. Have you ever thought you might actually be this world's hope? Clark gave him a puzzled look. Tony pushed on. Jarvis's data suggested this place was an extended universe built around a Superman-centered story. If the narrative centered on Superman, then the solution probably had to come from Superman. Even weakened, even with aching limbs, the plot favored a desperate breakthrough. Only you can save them now, Clark, Tony said, putting force behind his words. Think of your family, of the people who believe in you. But I've already lost my strength, Clark said. He sounded guilty. Without his powers, he had been reduced to staying at home with his family. If not for Iron Man, he wouldn't have been able to enter the void at all. Unless, Clark's gaze drifted to the universe bubble. For a flicker of a second, his look pierced the barrier and seemed to find the sun beyond their Earth. Only the sun, only bathing in its radiation, offered any chance of regaining his power. You want to go into the sun to take the raw radiation? Leon said quietly. He knew the storyline. He knew a Superman could sometimes ignite his latent potential there. But Clark didn't know what Leon knew, so Leon stared him down earnestly. You're in worse shape than an ordinary man right now. If you go into the sun as you are, you'll probably turn to ash instantly. But there is a sliver of a chance to save the world. Are you sure? Clark stared at the merging Earths, his expression far away, his eyes somehow finding Louise and holding her for a moment. Then he steadied himself. He had already wagered everything. Send me into the sun, Leon, he said. Leon put a hand on Clark's shoulder. You might die. Are you certain? There's no other way, is there? Clark answered. Earth needs me. The certainty in his voice was like sunlight itself. Simple, pure, ready to burn for others. Leon felt it through his armor, the burning resolve. The latent power in this Superman had never been so clear. Get ready. I'm very fast. You'll be at the sun in the next second. Clark gave a slight nod. Do it. Wait. Tony's voice shot up, loud and desperate. You just decided like that? You're really going to let Superman go into the sun like this? Chapter 310. Basking in the sun, then idealism explodes. John was anxious. Clark, don't be reckless. There have to be other ways. Louise is still waiting for you. Clark patted John's armor in silence. If I don't come back, take good care of Louise. You really want to do this? John ground out. Tony watched Clark with a complicated look. Clark, your Earth is lucky to have you. Clark smiled and turned to Duo. Let's go. Duo nodded. Close your eyes. I'll send you into the sun. Clark shut his eyes. Duo reached out and pressed the arc reactor on Clark's chest. The red and blue armor slid smoothly back into the reactor. Then, Duo gave him a gentle push, and Clark fell backwards. With his eyes clenched shut, Clark felt as if he were plunging into the sun. Memories flashed through his mind. His first meeting with Louise at the Daily Planet, the nervous joy when their twins were born, Lana in Smallville, all of it crystallized into a single unshakable resolve to protect Earth. Instead of burning, a hand steadied his shoulder, and then a tide of sunlight poured over him. The light didn't come from the real sun, but from Legieduo's world ring. Legieduo hadn't actually sent Clark into the sun. He'd brought a star with him. He wouldn't have allowed Wolf Superman to take such an unnecessary risk. But he also knew that without a perceived risk, Clark's resolve might falter. That was why Legieduo let Tony play his part. Tony's performance was perfect. First, he let Clark sink into despair, then he offered a sliver of hope. The combination triggered Clark's idealistic eruption, and Legieduo's 100,000 stars poured their light recklessly into him. The damaged cells in Clark's body, cells that had been absorbed by Ally, mended instantly. His aura grew explosively. In 10 seconds, Legieduo felt the pressure. After 30 seconds, he could no longer comprehend the force emanating from Clark. Tony and John stood dumbfounded beside him. Clark's power surged visibly before their eyes. After 10 minutes, Clark opened his eyes. They flashed like gilded searchlights, casting 2 golden beams into the void that left Legieduo stunned. Then the glow spread. Golden light rolled over him, suffusing his entire body. Even the red and blue of his suit became pure gold. The light felt sacred, suffused with supreme power. Legieduo felt a twinge of irritation. In the story he remembered, Clark should have had only red patterns appear on his body, not this full-on golden transformation. Now he felt a little foolish. But Clark seemed different now, almost omniscient. He looked at Legieduo and asked, "You didn't send me into the sun? Yes? Because I?" Clark finished his thought for him. "If you're looking for a life codex, I'm sorry. My father didn't give me any such genetic treasure. The Kryptonians of my universe never created a life codex." Legieduo's retort died in his throat. This version of Clark could just know things. There was nothing left to argue. Clark immediately apologized, sheepish. Sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. I suddenly knew." Legieduo narrowed his eyes. Cheating like that was no fun. Clark waved it off awkwardly. "Well, I'll go save Earth first." He thanked John and Tony quickly, then shot toward Earth. His speed far exceeded light, but oddly the 3 of them could still see him clearly. A golden trail followed him as he circled the 2 universe bubbles, forming halos around them, like the universe itself wearing an angelic crown. Clark entered the universe and descended to Earth with overwhelming speed. Golden light sprang from his feet and rippled across the world. The 2 massive universe bubbles paused and drifted apart, the overlapping Earth separated. Under the golden light, everything on Earth righted itself. The sky cleared, cities and people were restored. Even refugees who had died in the disaster were resurrected. Tony and John watched with wide eyes, unwilling to miss a single detail. Legieduo was shocked too, though the scene wasn't entirely different from the script in his memory. To him, this incredible golden display had been used for a comparatively small miracle. It felt almost wasteful. Clark returned from Earth and floated before them. "Guys, it's over," he announced with a gentle smile. The golden light receded. His hair went back to black, and the familiar red and blue suit returned. Legieduo blinked. "That ended just like that?" Clark looked down at himself, puzzled. Yeah. Is there a problem? The problem on Earth is solved, so I changed back." Legieduo gave a reluctant thumbs up. In his silver and blue form, Clark was magnificent and willful, discarding godlike power on a whim. Whether it was nobility or simple kindness, he had chosen to relinquish his golden state. "Oh, I almost forgot." Clark slapped his forehead. "Legieduo, you came to our universe to strengthen your genes, right? While I was like that, I could sense things. Let me help you." He extended a finger. A trace of gold clung to its tip and floated from Clark's hand into Legieduo's chest. Legieduo watched in astonishment as his genetic level rocketed upward. 301, 401, 501, 601, 801, 1, 901, 1000. His genetic tier jumped straight to 1,000-fold. His ability to absorb sunlight soared. His supervision transformed instantly. His biofield intensified wildly. Legieduo, who hadn't felt such intense emotion in a long time, stared, mouth slightly open, and pointed a trembling finger at Clark. "You? No need to thank me," Clark interrupted cheerfully. "Thanks to your help, Earth was able to overcome that crisis." He struck a small, proud pose. Legieduo wanted to complain. Why hadn't Clark helped him while he was golden? But he was also profoundly satisfied. Maybe Clark had crafted a temporary golden fingertip for this purpose. After all, without Legieduo's 100,000 stars pushing him into that golden state, Clark might never have become the super Kryptonian at all. Chapter 311, Tony Meets Marvel. Despite his satisfaction, Legieduo felt a twinge of regret. Clark had just shifted into Golden Superman to give him a boost, but Legieduo had already come out of his idealistic burst state, so he only gained a little. What a waste. Golden Superman wasn't just another power-up, it was the pinnacle of Superman's evolution, the Supreme Clark from DC 1 million. That Clark had traveled the universe, fought gods like Loki, endured war, plunged into a sun for 15,000 years, and come out transformed. He had cosmic-level power, omniscience, omnipotence, reality warping, the works. There were other versions that wore the golden mantle, the Clark in the Superman Fantastic Four crossover, the future state Superman, but none matched the original Supreme Superman's magnitude. In Legieduo's mind, Golden Superman was a special state. When Wolf Superman entered that state under the light of 100,000 stars, his superbrain seemed amplified to an unimaginable degree. He could analyze and reconstruct every piece of information his body touched instantly. That was why, even before Legieduo spoke, Wolf Superman already knew why he had come to the DC universe. That instantaneous analysis had been the crucial difference. The brief, firefly-like golden afterglow had let Legieduo's genetic level jump 1,000-fold. In a flash, he'd witnessed countless deductions, untangling genetic templates by the billions, hundreds of billions of Kryptonian templates, seeing how they could fuse with his own genes, stripping away the worthless and preserving the essential. The 1,000-fold gene leapt into being. The whole deduction happened in an instant. If he'd had to work through that himself, it would have taken decades, maybe a century. Now it was done. The task that had driven him to the DC universe had been completed. After dinner at Superman's house, he and Tony could go back to their own world. He felt an urge to return to Marvel and start on the Reduo clone immediately. Then he thought better of it. Since he was here, he might as well try to find a life codex before leaving. Smallville's Superman and Lois world didn't have one. He'd likely have to consult the broader DCEU's Superman. That sort of thing might only exist with Clark. Tony tapped on John's armor over the comms. "Buddy, Clark said your armor's strength isn't any less than his, and your speed matches him too. Is that true?" "He didn't lie," John replied with a loud chuckle that carried through the channel. "Your armor's pretty good too. Is it nanotech?" Tony wasn't modest, and John wasn't either. "Yep, this one's nanotech. I've also got biomaterial suits and magic-infused suits." Tony admitted, though he hated to, that his Mark armor probably couldn't beat Superman unless they had Kryptonite. In sheer strength, the Mark suit was inferior to John's. That was a fact. But Tony made up for it with variety and versatility. "Tony's a super genius from another universe," Clark said with a smile. John nodded. "Then I look forward to swapping armor tech with Tony." Tony's eyes lit up. "Good idea. My nanotech could be a useful reference." "By the way," Clark called, drifting back and waving at the three, "let's have dinner at my place tonight. Once the portal between the universes closes, it closes fast. Let's go back to Earth now." They returned to Earth through the space portal. Tony and Legieduo rode with John to the Kent farm. Clark had been everywhere. A brief appearance at the United Nations, stops at major nations, reassuring people with his smile that the apocalypse was over. At the Kent farmhouse, Tony and Legieduo sank into the sofa, drinking coffee Lois had brewed. John and his daughter sat nearby, along with Clark's two boys. The TV had begun airing Superman's interview. "Clark truly carries a heavy responsibility," Legieduo said, cradling his cup. Tony leaned back and seized a teasing opening. "Hey, look at this world's Superman, Legieduo. They're both Superman. Why can't you be like him and give people warmth every day?" Legieduo raised his cup in a mock toast. "Oh, come on. You're always trying to drag me into working for your Avengers. Why don't you call Pepper? She's pretty unstoppable now." "Clark has that problem too," Lois said, settling in beside them. She'd aged into middle age with the sharp, seasoned look of a professional journalist. Her features weren't conventionally glamorous, but she had been Clark's one true love after he left Smallville. He's trying to cut back on his worldwide rescues. We moved back to Smallville to spend more time with Jordan and Jonathan, Clark explained. Lois, curious, turned to Tony. You mentioned the Avengers. Are you really Tony Stark from Marvel? Jordan and Jonathan, sitting nearby, perked up. They were Marvel kids. They had stacks of comics in their room. I am Tony Stark, Tony said, reclining as if he could sign autographs on demand. But what is Marvel? Tony grinned. Clark's told me about it. It sounds like a wildly loud circus, and I'm one of the featured attractions, maybe the male lion or the fierce tiger that screams draw as soon as I step out. Legiduo laughed at him. You're joking, Tony. Male lion, that's Thor. Fierce tiger, that's Banner. At best, you're a big black bear trying to balance a ball. Are you serious? Tony set his cup down and pointed at the Kent boys. You're telling kids who look up to me that their idol is a black bear? Chapter 312. Stay at Kent Farm. Jordan and Jonathan stared at Tony like he was a movie star. Their excitement practically radiated from their faces. Leon spread his hands. All right, I won't say another word, for the kids' sake. The two brothers' eyes gleamed. So you really are Tony. You're Iron Man. Of course. Tony opened his arms. Come on, kids. Autographs, photos, whatever you want. He leaned toward Leon and murmured, Has Iron Man's reputation really spread across every world? Leon smiled but didn't answer. Jordan and Jonathan ran upstairs and came back a few seconds later carrying a huge stack of comic books. Please sign all of them, they begged. And sign twice, one for Tony Stark and one for Iron Man. Tony stared at the pile. Invincible Iron Man. Iron Age. I am Iron Man. Iron Man V1. Every single one was an Iron Man solo book with the Marvel logo stamped across the top. Patsky opened Iron Man V1 and found stories that sounded strangely familiar, versions of events from his own life. Some books even starred Spider-Man and Thor. After a long, slow scan, he looked at Leon, dazed. Marvel is a comic company, so is our world a comic too? Pretty much. Leon patted Tony's shoulder and shifted some world power to steady him. A revelation like that could be a serious mental shock. He'd read the stories, Professor X going mad after seeing Deadpool's memories, and he could understand why Tony might feel unsettled. But Tony took it in better than most. What's so weird about it? We have our own DC too. Didn't you make a Superman versus Iron Man film here? That's different. Tony flipped through another issue, expression twisting. He'd heard the monkey typewriter and world projection theories. He knew being the subject of a comic in another world wouldn't change his life, but the idea still left a hollow feeling. He forced a smile, picked up a pen, and signed the inside cover before handing the book back. My story must be pretty exciting for you to like it so much. I've got to be Marvel's #1 superhero, right? Jordan hesitated, then shook his head. Actually, in the comics, you're only B-list. Jonathan added, and in lots of stories, you're even a villain. B-list, a villain. Tony's unease flipped to indignation. Come on, kid. Tony Stark, genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist. How is that B-list? But who's A-list then? Leon, Pepper, Happy, Banner, Odin? Jordan said, it's Spider-Man. That kid's A-list, he's 6 or 7. This world is insane. Tony rolled his eyes. Then, nudging Leon, what about you, Leon? Where do you rank Superman? Jordan's brow furrowed. He thought hard and finally admitted, I've never heard of a character named Leon. Tony laughed. See? Leon, you only show up in my spin-offs. Nobody knows you. Leon was unamused. You keep gloating. The Time Variance Authority said I'm the anchor of our world. But you're not as famous as me, Tony said, throwing an arm around Jordan and Jonathan. Come on, kids. Show me upstairs. Let's see what else is in the Marvel comics. They went upstairs together. Leon shrugged toward Louise and John. No helping it. He's like this his whole life. Actually, I'm the older brother in our family. After Clark returned, the Kent family dinner officially began. It was a modest Western meal, steak and fried fish, mashed potatoes and red wine. Tony kept pulling Clark and the boys into long conversations about comic line lore, from the Living Tribunal to Galactus, from Death to Deadpool. Clark turned out to be a comics fan too, and he happily matched Tony's enthusiasm, until Louise cleared her throat to give a gentle warning. Clark laughed sheepishly, and then ate his food. That night, the Kents invited the two visitors to stay. Jordan and Jonathan cleared out their room and let the visitors have it. On the not large bed, Tony lay on his back with his hands behind his head and stared at the moon through the window. Even the moon in this world looked the same as home. "Leon, how long has it been since we slept in the same bed?" Tony asked. Leon, cramped beside him and propping up a small device to analyze kryptonite, smirked. "Never." "What? Then why does it feel like we used to sleep like this when we were kids? Like I'm snuggling up on a little bed with my grown-up younger brother, getting nostalgic and all." "That means it's an illusion. From childhood till now, you never took me to bed. It was always Jarvis and Pepper who stayed with me." "That's kind of sad." Tony gave an awkward laugh. Leon adjusted the molecular projection and asked, "So you're going to talk to John tomorrow about his armor tech? He's from another world too, and he doesn't have to work. I'll swap ideas with him for a few days." Tony smiled with pride. "In a few days, I'll have the anti-Superman armor ready. You nervous yet?" "Anti-Superman? You might be able to be anti-Clark, but you're 20,000 years too early to be anti-me." "You little..." Tony knew he couldn't beat Leon. Still, he liked to brag. "One day I'll show you the true anti-Superman armor." Leon laughed. "By the time you finish, I might be Super Superman." "A Super Superman still might not beat a Super Iron Man." Tony fluffed his pillow, pulled the blanket up, and nudged Leon. "Move over. You've taken up 2/3 of the bed." "Do you swim in your sleep? Why do you need so much space?" Leon scooped up the kryptonite device, climbed out of bed, opened the window, and slipped out. "Sleep tight. I'm going to sunbathe in space." "Turn off the light before you go," Tony began. Before he could finish, Leon shot up and vanished into the moonlight. Jarvis chimed from Tony's watch. "Sir, young Master Leon has already reached the moon." "That fast?" Tony grumbled. "Has he become Superman or an owl?" "He used to complain about me bringing people home and disturbing his sleep, and now he doesn't sleep at all." Tony shut off the light, burrowed back under the covers, and for the first time fell asleep in a bed on a Kansas farm. Chapter 3:13, Anti-Superman Armor. Legiduo sat in silence on the lip of a meteor crater. The sunlight had warmed the barren surface to well over 100 degrees Celsius. Sitting there felt like soaking in boiling water. He closed his eyes and let his consciousness slip into his inner world. The private realm that belonged to him alone now spanned 100 million kilometers across. World energy gathered above that continent of thought and wrapped around Legiduo's light. His Reed duoclone gestation ability activated again, disassembling the light, reading biological information, initiating gestation. His main body genes had been amplified 1,000-fold. This time, the third clone's gestation met no resistance. When dawn rose over Kent Farm, the activity in Legiduo's inner world calmed. An oval egg of golden light hovered in the void. Inside, the Reed duoclone slowly formed. The inner world gave him a readout. Estimated gestation time, 100 years. 100 years, Legiduo murmured, but I can speed it up with the time stone when I get back. He rose from the crater's edge and flew back toward Earth. At Kent Farm, Louise was already making breakfast. Clark was still asleep upstairs. Louise looked up in surprise when Legiduo entered. "You're up early. How did you sleep?" she asked. "Pretty well," Legiduo replied. "Your brother slept like a rock." Using his X-ray vision, he saw Tony curled on a couch, hugging a pillow and apparently still asleep. "You didn't rest? You didn't rest?" Louise asked. "I usually let my mind rest in sunlight, so I spend the night in space," Legiduo answered with a smile. He hadn't really slept in a long time. Even when his body rested, parts of his consciousness, the blood sea, the black light clone, remained alert. Sleep had lost its meaning for him. "Good," Louise said. "At least Clark doesn't nap in the sun." At that moment, Clark came downstairs, rubbing his eyes. Louise gave a mock dramatic roll of her shoulders and leaned against the counter, eyes fixed on him. "My Clark, my handsome husband, the love of my life, my greatest protector, surely I wouldn't speak ill of you." "Really?" Clark answered playfully, standing in the stairwell in gray pajamas, hands in his pockets, smiling at her. "What can I say? You look especially handsome today," Louise said, moving closer and tapping his chest with a finger. They drew nearer still. Legiduo coughed loudly to break the moment, an exaggerated, middle-aged sound, and the couple turned toward him, smiling. They kissed anyway. Clark nodded to Legiduo. "Morning. Didn't expect you so early. Do you usually start work that early where you're from?" "No, I'm up early to trade a few sweet nothings like you two," Legieduo teased. Tony, still sleepy-eyed on the couch, mumbled in agreement. Conversation drifted from playful to practical as breakfast wrapped up. Jarvis, as if on cue, gently roused Tony, and soon Jordan and Jonathan came downstairs as well. After coffee and toast, Tony left for John's workshop to talk about the Mark armor. Clark took Legieduo with him to the Department of Defense. Clark's father-in-law was a general who oversaw matters relating to Superman. At the department, they lent Legieduo several samples of Kryptonite, red, blue, black, and a number of vials of Clark's own blood. "Take as much as you need for genetic research," Clark said, handing over the tubes. "This blood was drawn last year when I was injured and rescued. Use it as a reference. But be careful with it," he warned. "Don't let any of it leak. If it gets out, the consequences could be severe." Legieduo didn't know all the details of this Superman's past, but he guessed some of it. For a Superman who kept his humanity, losses had taught lessons. Even a hero's blood needed to be handled with care. Clark added, almost reluctantly, "I actually came here intending to destroy this sample. I've had conflicts with the department for a long time." Legieduo nodded. He had seen similar power struggles in other worlds, when people tried to control what should belong to no one. Clark's history made sense. 2 days passed in a blur. Tony had planned a week with John to learn Mark armor technology. He assumed that building an anti-Superman suit would require a long, painstaking process. What surprised him was how straightforward John's design was. The Mark armor was high-tech, yes, but it wasn't orders of magnitude beyond what Tony already knew. The key difference was energy. John had powered his suit with Kryptonite, and that gave it the speed and toughness that mimicked Superman-level capabilities. Tony spent only a few hours with John and absorbed the rest on his own. For the next 2 days, he worked non-stop, fabricating parts and integrating Kryptonite energy cells. The result retained the classic gold and red look and a central arc reactor on the chest, but now 8 smaller oval energy cores ringed the main reactor, each one filled with Kryptonite. The frame itself contained pieces of Kryptonite, and the outer plating was layered with Kryptonite. Because Kryptonite couldn't be made into nanomaterials yet, the suit returned to a component assembly design rather than a seamless, self-forming shell. On a bright morning in the open lot beside the Kent Farm warehouse, Tony stood with his hand raised. From inside the warehouse, individual components lifted and flew to him, snapping into place. He was making a show of it, part of the fun. Jordan and Jonathan watched with wide eyes as the pieces clicked together. Even Clark and Louise couldn't hide their impressed smiles. With a final metallic click, the armor sealed. Tony spread his arms and let the sunlight flash off the polished metal. "This is Mark 17, he announced, voice proud. "My anti-Superman armor." The suit gleamed in the morning sun, every curve and seam engineered for both power and speed. Around the central arc reactor, the 8 oval cores pulsed faintly with Kryptonite energy. It was more than a demonstration piece. This was a weapon designed to challenge one of the most powerful beings on Earth. Chapter 314. Tony is full of confidence. "That looks pretty good. So do you want to try the armor's power now?" Leon stepped forward with unmistakable intent, flexing his wrist. Tony matched him step for step. "Of course." The anti-Superman armor's first real test should be against Superman. Through their faceplates, you could already see the glint of combat. Tony glanced at Clark the next second. "Clark, would you help me test the armor?" "Me?" Clark, arms folded, pointed at himself, surprised. Tony grinned. "Exactly. When you go all out against your brother, you don't hold back. I'm worried I might break him, so come help." Leon shrugged and took a step back. "Yeah, Clark should do it. Honestly, Tony's just worried I'll tear his suit apart, so try not to be careless." Clark shook his head, trying not to smile. "All right, I've got it. Leon's just being stubborn. Go all out," Tony called. "Hold on, one question before we begin." Clark adopted a casual stance, hands on his hips, in a plaid shirt. "There's no Kryptonite in your armor, right?" Tony waved him off. "No, apart from Leon, there aren't any Kryptonians in our universe. Kryptonite wouldn't help." Clark nodded. "Okay, then let's do a normal sparring test?" "Exactly. Then let's go." Clark rolled up his sleeves and waited. Tony didn't hesitate. He powered the suit and launched, a high-velocity punch aimed at Clark. Clark didn't try to dodge. He let the blow land to gauge it, then used the momentum to fly away. Before he hit the warehouse wall, Leon, who had appeared behind him, caught him. "You okay?" Leon asked. Tony was startled. He hadn't expected Clark to move like that and began to reassess the armor's performance. Clark stood, rubbing his ribs. "I'm fine. That punch of yours was as strong as mine, Tony." He nodded appreciatively. "Not bad. Good work building something this strong in only 2 days." Even Superman gave him praise. Tony felt a surge of pride and wanted to challenge Leon immediately, but he kept his cool and continued the test. They faced off again. This time, Clark caught Tony's punch steadily, and after feeling several blows, he started to counter. The fight went on the ground like a normal brawl, ordinary techniques, but every hit carried the force of a small mountain. There was no catastrophic explosion on impact, because Clark used a biofield to control the aftermath of each collision. After more than 10 minutes, both men were breathing hard. Leon watched, thinking Clark moved deliberately, like a regular person, because he wasn't in his usual costume. Tony lifted his faceplate and gasped for air. The suit's enhanced systems hadn't seen that level of exertion in a while. Clark accepted a towel Louise handed him and wiped his brow. "I didn't hold back," he said. "Your armor is stronger than John's. It put a lot of pressure on me." "Really?" Tony's eyes lit up. He turned to Leon, pride bubbling to the surface. "Leon, my anti-Superman armor can even pressure Superman. Before long, an anti-Leon armor won't be far off." Leon bristled at Tony's cockiness. "Why wait? Do it now, unless you're afraid." "What's there to be afraid of?" Tony spread his hands. "Come on, you test it too." Jarvis chimed in, level and precise. "Sir, Mr. Kent's current condition is not the same as when he separated universes before. The two are not directly comparable. Are you sure you want young Master Leon to engage?" "I'm sure, Jarvis," Tony said. He clipped his faceplate shut and smiled at Leon. "He'll hold back, don't worry." They stood opposite one another in the morning sun. "I'm going to attack," Tony warned. "Bring it." Leon stood casually with his hands behind his back. "Don't expect comfort when you get hurt." "Don't worry, I'll comfort you," Tony shot back, and then he lunged. The armor moved much faster than the old Mark suits ever had. Speed and power combined to make a very confident man. Tony felt the excitement of that confidence. And then his arm went numb. The world tilted, his vision spun, and everything went black. Bang! "Sir, you have been subdued by young Master Leon using an anti-joint lock," Jarvis reported. "Shut up, I can feel it," Tony groaned. He was pinned to the ground, arm twisted behind him like a suspect under arrest. "Damn, your speed and strength are crazy," Tony spat, coughing as dirt and sand poured into his open faceplate. "Of course." Leon released him and clapped once. "Your armor is still not good enough." He laid out the facts bluntly. Clark usually suppresses his strength. Most of his superbrain's computing power goes into holding himself back. What you saw today is only a few 100,000 tons of effective force. Your armor is at that level. Leon helped Tony up and tapped the suit. It rang with a metallic clank. "But the jump in power from your Mark suit to this is impressive. Before, your Mark armor was only a few thousand tons." "You'd better get used to it," Leon warned. "When you use this armor, be careful you don't hurt innocent people." Tony's hair was streaked with dirt and he looked a little rumpled, but he still curled a grin. So the anti-Superman armor was a success. The tests continued, guided by Leon's precise assessments. Tony ran the armor through strength, speed, durability, and impact absorption trials. In the suit, he felt like an iron Superman. By the time they finished, it was noon. After a final meal at the Kent house, the two teams said their goodbyes. Clark and his family walked them to the door. "Are you sure you won't stay a few more days?" Clark asked. "No," Leon said, waving. "If we stay any longer, Tony, the idol of Jordan and Jonathan, will turn into a pest taking up their beds." Tony laughed and addressed the kids. "I'll come see you again when I can. Leon still has to find the life codex, so Uncle Tony's going with him to make sure he's safe." "Don't believe him. He's just a troublemaker," Leon complained, activating his traversal ability. Keywords: Superman, Life Codex, Superhero's First Emergence. Leon already had most varieties of Kryptonite. This crossing was only about finding the Life Codex. Naturally, he aimed for the DCEU, the universe with Superman, and tried to land on the first appearance moment. The earlier the time, the younger Clark would be. Younger Clark would be easier to persuade. If he could arrive when Clark had just begun to awaken his powers, maybe Lion could demonstrate similar abilities and get permission to extract the life codex without a fight. He activated his crossing. Moving within the same omniverse was simple. A layer of void passed, his body sank, and he arrived. Blue sky, white clouds, salt on the air. And he was in freefall. Tony was falling too, but Jarvis had already fired the suit's thrusters to cushion the descent. Lion flipped himself upright and hovered. Tony lay unconscious inside the Mark armor. Jarvis had it controlled, so Lion didn't need to worry about him. Before Lion could scan the surroundings with super hearing, a deafening crash sounded from behind. The Mark armor, still rising on thrusters, slammed into a falling airplane. The airframe exploded in a sheet of fire and metal, scattering wreckage that plummeted into the sea. Jarvis maneuvered the armor through the blaze and hauled a figure free. "Apologies, young Master Lion," the AI said. During descent, the Mark armor's detection systems were offline and did not register the aircraft. The pilot was unconscious but alive, limp in Jarvis's grasp. Lion peered closer. Calloused hands, faded scars, this man was a soldier or mercenary. Tucked to his chest was a notebook. Lion pulled it free and skimmed the pages. Experimental procedures, synthesis formulas for some kind of poison gas. Poison gas. He stared at the pilot and the notebook, and a memory snapped into place. "This is Wonder Woman." A voice spoke from the cliff edge then, a young woman's voice. Lion turned to see who had addressed them. He was hovering off the face of a high coastal cliff on a vast island. Below, blue waves crashed against black rock. On the cliff, a girl in a leather bustier and short skirt watched them with curious, unguarded interest. Iron-capped boots covered her feet. Her legs were shapely, muscular, sun-bronzed. She looked like a Valkyrie carved from warm earth and sea wind, wild and commanding, but unrefined. Lion thought briefly of a character out of a game. Then it clicked. This was Diana. He had come too early. This was the era of Wonder Woman, 1916, 90 years before Superman's arrival. Still, the right world was the right world. He could shift time later if he needed to. The girl's gaze swept over Lion and his companions. She inspected Tony's inert suit and the rescued pilot, but barely registered them. Her eyes returned to Lion and lingered as if mesmerized. "You're more beautiful than any of the girls on the island," she said flatly. "Are all men like this?" Lion looked her over. She resembled the Wonder Woman he knew from films, only rougher, purer, and somehow more striking. He couldn't help a small grin. "The word you want is handsome, not beautiful," he said, "and yes, there are 3 men here." She considered the others, then pointed at the Mark armor. "Is he a man? He doesn't look like one." "He's wearing the armor. There's a man inside," Lion explained. "Oh." She cast a quick glance at the suit and then looked back at Lion, as if she didn't want to take her eyes off him. The sunlight felt warmer where it fell on him. To her, the whole world seemed suddenly clearer. "My name is Diana, Diana Prince. What's yours? How did you fall from the sky? Can you fly?" Her lashes fluttered. Her stare drifted over Lion's shoulders and back, and then returned to his face. Lion felt exposed and strangely guilty. Diana's expression radiated innocence, and despite her 1,000 years of life, she had the blunt curiosity of a child raised on a single island of women. "Lion Stark," he said. "I'm from another world. I came looking for Superman." "Another world?" Her curiosity deepened. In 5,000 years, Diana had known only the island and her Amazon sisters. Anything beyond was unknown. Lion realized how exotic even the idea of other worlds must sound to her. "Superman is from Krypton," Lion went on. "He won't arrive for decades." Diana leaned forward before he could finish. She reached out and pressed her hand to his chest. Lion's armor, the Dormammu armor in a casual guise, looked like a simple shirt under her palm. Her fingers trailed across the hard planes of his muscles. "Your body is so strong, stronger than anyone here. How do you train?" Her touch was frank and unself-conscious. Growing up among women with no concept of male-female boundaries, she simply had a primal curiosity about the differences between their bodies. Lion took an involuntary step back. Diana, in most places, girls don't just touch like that." He met her clear, open gaze and felt, absurdly, like he was doing something improper with a child. It made him uneasy. "Why?" she asked, genuinely puzzled. "Is that strange?" She gripped his hand suddenly and offered it. "You can touch mine too." Chapter 316, Zhang Chaoran always strikes at the last second. Leon froze for a moment. Diana was simply too straightforward, pure as crystal. He felt as if he were being cleansed just by being near her. Unfortunately, even Diana's seeming radiance couldn't undo the corrupting influence Tony had on Leon over the past decade. Guided by Diana's warmth, Leon's slender hand was about to rest on her full chest. "Damn, Tony, what have you done to my innocent heart?" Leon scolded his brother silently. It was all Tony's fault. Leon swallowed the sudden shame and braced himself for the softness he feared would meet his palm. Then an angry shout shattered the peaceful sunlight on the cliff. "Diana, get away from her! Bastard, take your hand off!" Diana flinched like a rabbit, hearing a wolf, and instantly shielded Leon. "Mother, he just happened to come to the island." She adopted a submissive posture and even defended Leon automatically. The woman who had arrived on horseback with dozens of Amazon warriors was Hippolyta, Diana's mother, the queen of the Amazons and a consort of Zeus. Her thunderous, furious gaze seemed like it could pierce Leon's skull. Even he, a man of some experience, felt exposed and guilty, as if he'd been caught sneaking into a wealthy household for a secret tryst. "This is a misunderstanding, Your Majesty," Leon said honestly. Hippolyta wasn't interested in explanations. She grew angrier. Her flushed face hardened. With the clang of metal, she drew her long sword and pointed its tip at Leon as if to lop his head off. Leon's pupils tightened. He thought he might finally have to show what he could do. But then Hippolyta roared, "Let go of my daughter's hand." "Huh?" Leon looked down. Diana had been shielding him, pressed against his chest, and was holding his hand tightly to her. He'd been so nervous he hadn't noticed how soft her palm was. It was all nerves. He absolutely hadn't meant to linger. He remembered Tony vowing to give up drinking and gambling months ago and felt ashamed of his own weakness. He withdrew his left hand and offered his right to Diana, saying earnestly, "Your Majesty, I came to Paradise Island by accident. I mean no offense. I only wanted to help you with some trouble." Hippolyta glared at the audacious young man, taking advantage of her daughter. The Amazon warriors behind her were stunned, but not by his behavior. They were stunned by his appearance. The Amazons were ancient and reclusive. Some of the younger warriors had never even seen a man, and the first man they had seen was astonishing. Several female riders lost their grip on the reins. The horses threw their heads, uneasy. Some warriors felt an almost animal urge to call to Diana to step back and let them take her place. Hippolyta, however, didn't notice her subordinates' reactions. She stared at Leon and decided he must be driven from Paradise Island. Men were not welcome here, handsome or not. She raised her sword to order his capture. At that moment, a different roar came from the sea beside Paradise Island, the sound of shells leaving their barrels. Killing intent thundered from the distant sky. Everyone turned toward the ocean. Within the waters, shielded by Zeus's power, a massive steel battleship had appeared. Black smoke billowed, a steely whistle cut the air, and it began to bombard the island without warning. Dozens of shells screamed down, blotting out the sun with their passage. Many of the Amazons, who had been isolated for millennia, had never seen such weapons. They tightened their grips, trying to control their panicked horses as the shells arced toward them. All they could do was raise their shields. Hippolyta, stunned, only came to herself as the shells were almost overhead. "Take cover! Quickly!" she cried. But the shells were already upon them. Metal warheads, a presence of certain death, rushed in. At the last instant, General Antiope flung herself at Hippolyta, knocking the queen off her saddle. Hippolyta watched in horror as a shell bore down on Antiope. Diana, at the cliff edge, let go of Leon's hand in a panic. There seemed to be nowhere to run. With less than a second before the shells hit, Leon, standing behind Diana, changed. His pupils shifted from black to a burnished crimson. The entire air around him altered. He was no longer the hapless traveler who'd wandered into the island. His sunny, boy-next-door demeanor vanished. A murderous intent, far greater than the force of the incoming shells, erupted from him. Crimson light shot from Leon's eyes, slashing through the sky. The majority of the shells disintegrated in those beams. The battleship itself seemed to melt under that light. From bow to stern, it broke apart and began to sink. The coastline was bathed in a hellish red glow. The sea flashed like a scarlet tide, reflecting a fractured sky. When the crimson beams faded and Leon's eyes returned to black, there was a moment of stunned silence. Then, boom, a shell Leon had left behind detonated in a nearby forest. Earth and stones flew. Splinters rained down like embers. The Amazon warriors, still reeling from the earlier terror, looked toward the burning grove with a mixture of relief and renewed fear. Hippolyta's gaze met Leon's, and although the red in his eyes had faded, something of that abyssal intensity lingered. It made her chest tighten, as if she were staring into a void. When the last of the fire in his gaze went out, Leon lifted an eyebrow and said lightly, "See, Your Majesty, I told you I came to help." The abyss closed, and the young man who had stumbled into the land of women returned to being simply that, young, disarming, and oddly composed. Chapter 317, Diana is supposed to beat Ares. Hippolyta rises with the support of her generals, eyes complicated as she studies Mr. Lion. "Do you know who they are?" Mr. Lion nods, indicating the man Jarvis is holding, the pilot. "They're German soldiers. They came after this spy." "Soldiers," Hippolyta frowns. "Paradise Island has been peaceful for millennia. Now that peace is broken. This could be a sign of danger for the island, danger that might come from Ares, from the mother box left by Zeus, or perhaps from the young man standing before her." "Soldiers? Has another war broken out in the outside world?" Diana blurts, still beside Mr. Lion with her arms folded. She only awakened her divine power today and hasn't yet sorted out everything that's happened. If Mr. Lion hadn't stepped in, spurred by the death of her companion, she would have unleashed a torrent of divine energy to stop those cannonballs. Instead, she stands like a statue, all seriousness. "Is that true?" "That's right," Mr. Lion says. "There's a world war raging outside. Casualties have already reached nearly 10 million. He lifts the notebook taken from the pilot. This notebook records a poison gas, an instrument of war one of those nations plans to use. It will slaughter civilians and soldiers alike. At the word slaughter, Diana's eyes flare. "Mass murder? That can only be Ares' doing," she says with sudden certainty. She turns and stares at Hippolyta. "Mother, Ares must have returned." "He's been hiding since Zeus defeated him, biding his time," Diana continues fiercely. "Only he would start a war like this, bringing misery to so many. We have to stop him." Hippolyta is stunned by the conviction in her daughter's voice. Diana presses on. "Bring me the God-killer's sword. Let us go stop Ares, mother." Hippolyta's composure cracks. "I will not allow any Amazon to take part in human wars. That is not our way." "No, how can you say that? Stopping Ares is our duty. Wasn't that what you taught me?" Diana says, furious. Hippolyta once told her the story of Zeus creating mankind, of Ares inciting war, and of how Ares was finally stopped by the Amazons and Zeus together. She regrets telling Diana now. "Even so, I will not allow you to leave Paradise Island. That is an order." Knowing she cannot persuade her daughter, Hippolyta steels herself. She bows slightly to Mr. Lion. "Thank you for your help, stranger. If you wish, the Amazons can offer you gold, war horses, and weapons as reward." Mr. Lion feels as if he stepped back into myth. Gold, war horses, weapons. Paradise Island's sense of wealth hasn't caught up with the wider world. "No need for a reward," he says. "I was only passing through while looking for someone." Hippolyta does not press. "In that case, the Amazons will be your eternal friends." She hesitates, then corrects herself. "You may address me as Your Majesty, Mr. Lion." "All right, Mr. Lion, we are grateful." She pauses. "But Paradise Island is a secluded place. We do not mingle with the outside world. Please forgive us for not being able to host you and your companions." "So?" Mr. Lion raises an eyebrow. Hippolyta's meaning is clear. If he keeps off the island, they will offer what aid they can. Mr. Lion shakes his head. "There's no need. I'm truly only passing through." Hippolyta visibly relaxes. "Thank you again for your help. I will leave Antiope behind. You may tell her whatever you need." She pulls Diana gently toward the warriors, intending to leave the girl under Antiope's watch. Diana is the daughter of Hippolyta and Zeus, a demigod in an age when the gods have largely departed. If Ares truly has returned, Diana, one of the few with divine blood, would be in unimaginable danger. Hippolyta cannot let her go. Keeping Diana on the island keeps her safe from Ares' shrine. Notice, Diana shakes off her mother's hand and shouts that humans are good, kind, and worthy of protection. She will not stand aside. Helpless, Hippolyta departs with the reluctant host, leaving Diana in Antiope's care. "Why doesn't Mother understand me? She told me everything about Ares, Diana says, sinking onto a stone, her expression stubborn and wounded. She looks like a young woman who believes she already knows the world, only to be told she cannot act. Mr. Lion watches and smiles inwardly. Diana, who has never left Paradise Island, is immature, reckless, impulsive, and stubborn. Yet she is also brave and pure. Even after decades among humans would wash some of that naivete away, her persistence and kindness would remain. If you find Ares, how will you stop him? He asks. By plunging the god-killer into his chest, Diana answers, clenching her fist. Zeus left that sword to deal with Ares, but it's locked in the high tower and Mother won't let me leave. Then leave, Mr. Lion says. Diana's eyes suddenly catch light, hard as gems. Mr. Lion, you're so powerful, you glow red, you fly. Why not take me with you? Mr. Lion looks down at her. Take you to find Ares? Yes, wherever there's war, there's Ares. Those soldiers were sent by him. We'll go to the country behind them, find the leaders, find where the gas is made. Stop him. She rattles off a string of deductions so fast she sounds like she's been holding back all winter. Then, suddenly, her face changes. She stares at Mr. Lion, eyes full of unease. Mr. Lion, you're so powerful and you flew here with them. You couldn't be Ares, could you? Diana stares intently, every nerve strained, while Antiope, who had listened without interrupting, quietly grips the hilt of her sword. Chapter 318, Ares. The sudden 180-degree turn nearly made Leon stumble. He stared at Diana, unsure whether to laugh or cry. How could I be Ares? If I were Ares, why would I save you? Wouldn't I just stand back and watch you and those soldiers fight to the death? Diana blinked, visibly relieved, and smiled sheepishly. You're right, Leon. How could you be Ares? I should apologize. She didn't even consider the possibility that Ares might be pretending to be virtuous to infiltrate Paradise Island. The naive part of her accepted Leon's denial without question. Even Antiope, standing beside her, relaxed her grip on her sword hilt. Leon noticed and sighed inwardly. These Amazons were astonishingly trusting. Then let's go defeat Ares together, Leon. Diana's fighting spirit flared again. She rose, clenched her fist, and fixed Leon with determined eyes. Are you planning to sneak off? Isn't that general still watching you? Leon pointed at Antiope. A flicker of conflict crossed Diana's face. A few seconds later, she gritted her teeth. We'll knock her out. Antiope rolled her eyes and turned her back to them. Diana, go. I'll talk to the queen. Her voice was muffled. As Diana's aunt and secret trainer, Antiope had defied Queen Hippolyta's ban on sword practice for the girl's sake. She loved her niece and feared for her safety, but she also knew Diana had been born under a destiny. With Ares stirring a war, that destiny was coming due. Really? Diana beamed. If even Antiope was willing to let her go, what other hesitation did she have? She tugged on Leon's arm, eager to storm the island and seize the god-killer weapon. Leon hadn't expected even Antiope to be so convinced that Ares had returned, based only on a hostile fleet and rumors of a world war. It felt rash, he thought, but he let Diana pull at him for now. He glanced toward the Mark armor. Tony was still unconscious inside. The man had stayed up all night building the armor, and exhausted by the interworld crossing, had simply collapsed. With Tony out cold, there was time to linger. Leon pulled Diana back again. What's wrong? She asked. Actually, I have some information about Ares, Leon said. He's currently disguised as a lord in London, controlling agents among the opposition and pushing a gas plan. Diana's grip tightened. Then we must hurry and stop him. Now, let's seize the god-killer sword. She was no longer sneaking. She was ready to charge for the divine weapon. Leon stopped her again. The god-killer won't help. Ares is a god. To kill a god, you either have to be far stronger than he is, or you have to be another god. Diana frowned. Where would we find a second god? Even Zeus has been dead for millennia. You, Diana, Leon pointed at her. You're the second deity. You carry Zeus's blood. You are a demigod. She looked stunned. But Mother said I was molded from clay and Zeus gave me life. Leon chuckled. That means Zeus also gave you his blood. You'll learn more when you mingle with human society. Learn what? Diana found his words strange. She stared at her arm and tightened her fist. If I can defeat Ares, then let's go. Her resolve returned. She scooped up her sword and shield and tried to pull him toward the island gate. This time, they were ready to leave Paradise Island. Leon stopped her once more. Wait, there's something else. Diana blinked. What is it? Instead of hunting him down in London, I have an easier way. Leon smiled and traced a circle in the air with his right hand. Golden sparks bloomed out of nothing, tracing the motion until they coalesced into a shimmering circular portal, one of his mystic arts. The spatial rules here were similar enough to his own realms that he could use the technique without trouble. The portal opened onto another place in London. On the other side, a well-dressed middle-aged man with a thick beard sat at an office desk. He looked startled and bewildered the instant the portal revealed Diana, and he practically sprang to his feet. It's you, the child born of Zeus and Hippolyta. His face was calm, his gaze locked on Diana. He did not panic or flee. He must have known the portal was for him. You know me, Diana stared. He's Ares, Diana, Leon said softly from beside her. Diana's eyes sharpened. Ares, your plan to subvert the world and slaughter the living ends now. She raised her sword and shield, roaring, I am Diana Prince, daughter of Queen Hippolyta of Paradise Island. She pointed the long blade straight at the man. In the name of a beautiful future for the world, the Amazon will do her duty today and end you, send you to eternal death. Diana's voice was fierce. Antiope, panicked, blew an ox horn to sound the alarm. Ares, however, regarded them with a calm smile. He walked slowly around his desk and stepped through the portal as if entering a parlor, not an ambush. Leon shoved the pilot out of the Mark armor and sent him through to the London side, then casually closed the portal, cutting off Ares' retreat. The god of war still took in his new surroundings with amusement. This is Paradise Island, the Amazon home protected by Zeus? He laughed aloud, joy bubbling up as if he hadn't felt such pleasure in thousands of years. I didn't expect you would send me here. Ha ha ha! He smiled at Diana, a cold affection in it. Diana, perhaps I should call you my dear sister. The smile faded. His voice rolled along the shoreline. Why do you want to protect humans? They are treacherous, foolish, cruel, and belligerent. What makes them worthy of your protection? He spread his hands. Before Zeus created humans, how beautiful the world was. Lush forests, azure seas, clear skies. But once humans came slaughter and destruction. This world is defiled, Diana. Join me. Together, we can destroy humanity and reshape the beautiful world it once was. Chapter 19. Growing Up in Despair. Lies. Diana's eyes were cold as a blade. The Amazons exist to protect humanity. Your lies won't sway me, Ares. Ares smiled, dismissive. You are as naive as I once was. Long ago, Ares had believed, like Diana, that humanity was noble, but he had seen too much war, pillage, deceit. Since mankind's first days, conflict had never ceased. One disappointment led to another. In time, he renounced them all. He thought that once Diana truly saw humanity, she would change, as he had. He glanced toward the island's interior. After Antiope had sounded the horn, Queen Hippolyta had already led her warriors out on horseback. A yellow dust cloud swirled in the distance. For a moment, Ares' eyes turned hard. You brought me to Paradise Island, he said evenly. I intended to burn it to the ground. But you've surprised me, Diana. You have potential. We should work together. He regarded her steadily. If you still cling to naive illusions about humanity, then go, see the world of men. Once you see their true faces, you will join me. Today I give you and Paradise Island a chance. The next time we meet, you will give me your answer. Ares straightened his wool trench coat, set his top hat back on, and rose. His use of godly power far exceeded Diana's. Flight was the least of it. He clearly intended to leave. Diana could not let him go. You can't leave. She unfastened the rope at her waist, flung it with practiced skill, and looped it around Ares' ankles. It wasn't the lasso of truth, but a heavy hemp rope, sturdy. She pulled with all her might. Ares, caught in midair, lost his balance. You actually think you can restrain me? He said, annoyed. Ares' coat was tugged askew. He had reasoned with heroes, let them live, given them time to grow, only to be affronted by one who brandished a knife at a godlike being. Diana, you, who cannot even wield godly power properly, if you insist on provoking me, I will show you the price of ignorance. Words were useless. Diana tossed the rope aside, drew her sword, and raised her shield, charging the ground where Ares had landed. Antiope, done sounding the horn, drew her own blade and joined the charge. Hippolyta, racing from the island, was close behind. Ares watched them with cold amusement. Without Zeus's direct intervention, even the full force of Paradise Island could not stand against him. Diana, burning with battle intent, swung at him. He raised a hand and repelled her. She flew backward through a tangle of bushes. Ares restrained himself. He still hoped this half-sister might someday aid him. Antiope fared worse. As she lunged, Ares made a casual motion. Divine power ripped the longsword from her grip and flung her through the air. The stolen sword followed and impossibly pierced Antiope mid-flight. The blade slid through flesh with a sound that was both faint and terrible in the wind. Diana pushed aside the brush and saw it. Her aunt impaled, blood flowing along the sword. "No, Antiope!" Her pupils shrank, and with a burst of godly power she sprang forward, clearing the bushes to catch the falling Antiope. But catching her did nothing. Just moments earlier, Antiope's steady encouragement had steadied Diana. Now her breaths came shallow and quick. Her eyes, barely holding open, found Diana one last time before closing. Her warm body grew cold in Diana's arms. "No, no." Diana pressed and rubbed, willing warmth back into her. Antiope's fingers loosened. Her heart stilled. Diana realized, in a rash, agonized way, that she would never hear her aunt's voice again, never feel her hand correct a sword stance. No, her tears fell, and a new, terrible resolve hardened her gaze. "Ares, I will not let you escape." The godly power Diana had not been able to control before now broke free, unleashed by grief and rage. She charged again, a furious whirlwind, determined to kill Ares. At the island's cliff edge, however, another scene played out. Leon held back a very much alive Antiope, keeping her from rushing to Diana. "Let me go. Diana needs me," she begged. Antiope had been saved at the last instant, pulled clear before the blade struck. Leon had stopped her here, forced her to watch Diana embrace what she thought was a corpse. Her heart ached watching Diana's desperate grief. She guessed immediately what had happened. Leon had used an illusion. Ares, meanwhile, did not notice. He watched Diana's breakdown from afar with a quiet, almost hungry admiration, convinced it was real. An illusion strong enough to fool a true god. How terrifying. "You trained Diana when she was young to help her grow," Leon said to Antiope. "I'm doing the same now," he added. The simplest way for Diana to master godly power is to let it erupt through intense emotion. In the film, Diana had grown stronger each time she fell into despair. This sacrificial method, turning anguish into power, was a brutal but effective training mode. Leon explained that illusions from the starry sky world were both vivid and tenacious, perfectly suited to that purpose. Masters of illusion there could trap even powerful beings in fabricated worlds for tens of thousands of epochs without arousing suspicion. Look at Diana now. Her despair had already pushed her to trade blows with Ares. She was still at a disadvantage, but she had improved. And the Amazon force surging from the island, those were moments and catalysts Leon had prepared for her next leaps in strength. For Leon, Ares was hardly worth killing. He could take care of a god with a single heat vision blast if he chose. It was far more useful to let Ares spar with Diana, to sharpen her against a foe worthy of her wrath. Chapter 10. Return to heaven after despair. Diana staggered back under Ares's blows, rising again and again. Scars had already appeared across her body. The death of Antiope was the only thing that kept her moving forward. Under the influence of Leon's illusions, she had pushed everything else, even the presence of her companion Leon, to the edges of her mind. All that remained was a single purpose: protect humanity and avenge her aunt. Ah! Another swing of her sword. Ares dodged with casual ease. Powerlessness washed over Diana. Doubt crept in. Could she truly defeat the god of war? Then the ground shuddered. Hooves thundered like a storm across the slope. Reinforcements had come. Queen Hippolyta and the Amazon army. "Prepare!" Hippolyta rode out from the crest of the hill, blade raised, gesturing skyward. "Fire!" At her command, a dense rain of arrows rose into the air, falling in a precise curtain around Ares' position. A flicker of hope broke through Diana's grief, but it vanished the instant the arrows stalled mid-flight. Ares' hand shot upward, and, as if pausing the world, he froze the volley. With a lazy flick, he redirected them back at the Amazons. The rain that had aimed to strike him now cut into their ranks. "Mother!" Diana's voice cracked. Hippolyta parried and slashed, cutting down arrows as they fell, urging her horse forward, eyes locked on Ares. "Ares, so it is you." Shock flared on the queen's face only for a moment. In a crisis like this, she had one duty: protect her daughter. "Diana, leave here," she shouted. Hippolyta charged alone, glass steel resolve in her movements. "Everyone, with me!" "No, mother, stop!" Diana let her sword clatter aside and lunged to block her, but Ares had been waiting, hungry, since the moment he saw Hippolyta. He surged forward like a man possessed and seized the queen by the throat, lifting her right out of the saddle. "You never expected me back on Paradise Island, did you?" Ares snarled, holding Hippolyta aloft. His eyes cut to Diana. "Diana, join me now and I can spare your mother." Diana's hands trembled. She could not ally herself with a god who sought humanity's annihilation, yet she could not look on Hippolyta's death. She stood frozen, torn. Then Hippolyta, the woman who had always opposed Diana's hunt for Ares, found strength enough to speak. Her voice was a ragged whisper. "Go, Diana, leave, be who you want to be, then kill Ares." Ares' expression darkened. "After all these years, you still don't understand. Humanity cannot be saved, Hippolyta. If you cannot understand, then sleep with Zeus," he spat. In a brutal instant, his hands crushed her throat. A sharp crack sounded. He flung the queen's body aside, as though discarding worn armor. Anger roared from Ares. He lifted his arms, and the earth obeyed. The ground before him rolled up like a carpet, the sky darkened, and a crushing weight descended, burying the Amazon warriors beneath the soil. Diana, hollow-eyed at her mother's death, felt a new, piercing pain. She sprinted toward the fallen fighters, intent on digging them out, but Ares waved his hand. Divine force threw her back, pinning her to the ground. She forced herself to rise with her own power, but it was too late. Not a single Amazon survived. Bodies and earth swallowed together. Diana collapsed in the mud, devastated. Only minutes earlier, she had still been an innocent girl preparing to cross to the world of men, carrying her mother's disapproval. Now she had nothing left. No aunt, no mother, no sisters. She stared at her dirt-streaked palms. Grief pooled in her chest, and from that well of sorrow a cold, radiant fury ignited. It began as a small flare and swelled into a raging inferno. When Diana looked up, her face was gone. In its place was a still mask of righteous wrath. Her divine power poured out like a river finding the sea. The clear sky blackened, wind screamed, and the cliff's soil and detritus lifted and whirled as if gravity itself had inverted. Ares watched her approach. For the first time, his confident mask faltered. Still he boomed, "Diana, this is what happens when you oppose me. Now you will follow your mother." He raised both hands. Lightning ripped the sky and coalesced in his palms. From the ocean's floor, long-sunken warships split and reassembled. Iron and steel rose, binding to Ares' form like living armor. "You will die," he roared, summoning divine lightning to strike. Diana raised an arm to meet it. The bolts that had cut across the heavens vanished as if swallowed, funneling into her forearm and dispersing harmlessly across her skin. Ares' eyes widened in disbelief. He unleashed everything. Sand and stone hurled like knives, the earth buckling into ridges and spikes, metal shaping itself into weapons. Nothing mattered. Every attack disintegrated on the fringe of an invisible power that shrouded Diana. She walked forward, step by inexorable step, lifeless calm in her gaze. When she brought her arms together, the lightning Ares had drawn up erupted into her, as though she were a conduit. The world brightened into a blinding white. When the light faded, Ares was gone. Paradise Island itself had been torn apart by the unleashed divinity. Only the patch of earth beneath Diana remained. She sank to the ruined ground, numb, listening to waves slam against the cliffs far below. Ares was dead. She had her vengeance, and humanity was safe. But there was nothing left to make the victory worth. Tears tracked down hollow cheeks. A hand touched her shoulder. Diana turned. Leon stood there, calm as ever, a small smile on his face. He gave her a thumbs up. "You did well, Diana. You did great. Congratulations on defeating Ares." Leon?" she breathed. Relief and a dozen other emotions collided in her chest. She had assumed he was gone, thought him lost to the battle. That he stood before her alive steadied something frayed inside her. Leon patted her head once more. "Actually, I saved your family, and Paradise Island as well." Diana followed his gesture, lowering her gaze. The cliff before her, once shattered by her power, had returned whole. Behind it, Hippolyta, Antiope, and all the Amazons stood, faces wet and drawn but alive, each looking at Diana with a mixture of pain and love. Struck by the sight, Diana broke down. No, Mother, Antiope, everyone, she sobbed. She collapsed into tears of relief and sorrow at once. You're all okay.